Well, a very good morning to everybody and a warm welcome to this week's Ramsac webinar. For those of you I don't know, my name is Dan May. I'm the Managing Director here at Ramsac, and I'm delighted today to be joined by my colleague Paul Mew, who leads our Power BI projects and consultancy. And today's webinar, rather than being a PowerPoint-based webinar, it's very much a sort of a chat. Paul and I are going to take you on a journey through our own sort of Power BI experience and trying to bring the product to life for you and show you a little bit of what's possible with the technology. Just a couple of housekeeping points. As you'd expect, we are recording the call and we will make a recording available to you after the call is finished. That will come out to you later on this afternoon, along with a sort of a brief follow-up survey, so you can tell us what you think about the webinar and talk about any future sort of webinar programs you'd like us to run. We have put everybody on mute for obvious reasons, but you can use the Q&A or the chat function, and a couple of my colleagues are going to be monitoring that. So rather than it all appearing live, I think we'll answer some. If they're very specific questions, we'll answer them directly. If they're questions we think the group would benefit from, then we'll answer those in the group. And there is a Q&A session at the end of this call. We'll finish by 11. We'll keep to the time advertised. Appreciate everyone's got very busy days, so we'll make sure we're all wrapped up by 11 a.m. But hopefully, unless Paul and I get too into geeking off about Power BI, we will include some time at the end for a Q&A. So generally, the purpose of today's call is just Power BI isn't a new technology. It's been around a few years now, and it's and we'll talk about how it's purchased, but it's part of that sort of Microsoft suite of products. And it's fair to say that in our own experience as a business, it's been quite revolutionary, really. In a modern business, data is power. Data and knowledge really drive informed decision making. But one of the challenges that we certainly faced, and I'm going to talk a lot about Ramsac today, you know, the journey we're going to take you through with our use of Power BI, I think will be very typical to one that might be facing your organization. So we're using ourselves as a bit of a case study here, because everything that Paul's going to show you today is stuff that he's done for us. And we were faced a few years ago now with a sort of a lack of clarity on data. I think, like most businesses, we were amassing data at a rate of knots in all kinds of different forms. Data coming from Microsoft, from the 365 platform, data coming from our CRM system, for us, our service system, the system we use to schedule all of our work and to record all of our IT support tickets. We'd got data that sat in finance, which was a completely separate application. Some of you might have data sat in ERP systems, and of course data often sits in Excel spreadsheets as well. And we had no shortage of data, but what we lacked was clear visualization of that data. And what we also lacked was something that kind of pulled all those pieces together. We'd got some brilliant reports that sat in our CRM system. We'd got some brilliant reports that sat in our finance system, but the two weren't linked. And what we really wanted to be able to do is combine knowledge, combine data to say, well, if we've got something sat over here telling us that thing, if we can cross-reference it with this thing over here, what does that tell us? So Paul started Ramsac's journey on Power BI probably about 5 years ago now, Paul, something like that. It's not an exaggeration to say it kind of revolutionized the time we had to spend creating manual reports was one thing, but also the knowledge it gave us about our own business, a business that we thought we knew inside out. Suddenly we were getting new knowledge and new information by comparing bits of data from different platforms. So what we want to do today is just talk to you about that, really. Paul is going to share some information. We're not going to go into, this isn't an in-depth tech how-to webinar as far as Power BI is concerned. Paul's not going to necessarily be showing you the back end. Bit more a sort of a demonstration of what's possible, and hopefully a demonstration of how data coming from different sources can be pulled together into this Power BI platform, and just to give you an oversight of what it looks like in real terms, so that we can then carry on a conversation if that's something that you think you might need some help with. So as I say, we're not going to talk tech today. We're very much going to talk business process, and we're going to talk about it in real terms, in the real lived experience of us as an IT service provider. So I hope that's okay. I hope you're still with us. And as I say, if you've got questions along the way, feel free to raise those, and we'll try and make some time for questions after the call as well. So it's fair to say, Paul, that the Power BI journey that we've been on over the last 5 years, well, it's certainly been a journey, and in fact, it hasn't really ended, has it? Do you want to tell us a little bit about how we got started and some of the steps we've been through?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dan. So, as you touched on, so about 7 years ago, actually, we implemented like a new line of business system that kind of runs everything really through support, kind of quoting, projects, invoicing, all of that sort of stuff. But reporting was actually quite hard work, kind of within that system. I'm sure everyone's got experience with reporting that's kind of in systems that's a bit clunky, maybe doesn't look great, takes quite a while to run, and has to be run manually every time you want to kind of pull a report from the system. So it feels like a bit of a chore to look at the data. So plus, again, as is probably the case with most of you, as Dan's touched on, we had data in kind of various different systems. So that was, again, another manual job to kind of put all that together. So our people were spending huge amounts of time trying to put all that data together manually. So again, probably a familiar story, export it out of various different systems into kind of Excel, then copy and paste it into various other places. Do put some filter on it, work out some formulas and formatting, put some kind of pivot tables and all that kind of pain in Excel. So it was really kind of painful and time consuming, definitely not updated as regularly as they'd like. And in some cases, I think it just didn't feel like it was really worth the effort. So we definitely had questions kind of, oh, that'd be interesting to know. But when you think those questions, you think, okay, well, actually that's going to generate 5 hours worth of work because someone's got to go through and manually pull all that data out of systems to answer it. A lot of those questions, I think, just don't get answered. So you end up just making some of those decisions around just a bit more on gut feel rather than actually on the data. So like Dan said, I discovered Power BI about 5 years ago. Initially, that started with me just automating the reports that I knew we needed. We already had those kind of reports, but it's just automated, which straight away was a big cost saving in terms of time, because like I say, we've kind of had loads of there were people that could get on with other things rather than having to kind of export and pull data together. And it's just grown from there, really, with us now bringing in data from loads of different systems, spreadsheets, creating reports to give us more information that we didn't have before. It's really driven efficiency. It's definitely been a great tool for answering those questions that you kind of got in the back of your mind about the business, but you don't have an easy answer to. So like, are we confident that actually we're delivering great customer service, and that are our resourcing levels right in particular teams, and the fundamental ones around kind of actually are all of our customers and services profitable. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And unlike running a point in time report, which you might do once a month for a board meeting, it's the fact that information is live, right? So it's no good us analysing our, you used the example there of, support efficiency. It's no good us analysing support efficiency at the end of the month to discover that 3 weeks ago we were really struggling to hit our SLAs. We need to know now. We need to know hour by hour. Which in the days of the manual reporting, you'd have to have full-time sort of database analysts just doing that all day, every day, wouldn't you? So I know in our case, you took data from some Excel spreadsheets, you took data from our CRM system, you took data from finance. Is there anything you can't get data from?
So I've not found anything yet. Obviously, some systems are going to be easier than others. So our main application, which is fully cloud-based, not kind of a database that we host, it's kind of say cloud-based system, is actually quite straightforward as they provide access to the database behind the scenes, which I found is the case with quite a lot of kind of cloud-based systems. And certainly kind of if you host the system yourself, it's pretty likely you've got access to the database. But it's certainly really easy to get any access to anything stored in Microsoft 365, whether that's sort of spreadsheets, SharePoint lists, databases in Microsoft 365. There are some applications where I've had to do some work with their API, which is like their kind of its programming interface that most cloud applications have that allows them to integrate with other things. I've been able to use that to pull the data. So generally it comes down to the time it takes to get access. But even for something complex where you have to kind of do a bit of work around an API, a bit of programming work, if that's saving a couple of your staff even just a few hours every month, that's going to carry on forever. So that kind of time saving just grows and grows over time, plus all the insights that you can get from then combining that data with other systems, and it's probably worth doing. I mean, we've even got a way of getting data out of completely closed systems that we've used with using Microsoft robotic process automation kind of tools, which I won't talk about here, but obviously happy to have a chat afterwards if anyone's interested. But so there's very little we can't get access to. So as an example, our kind of customer satisfaction system that we use only has API access to the data, so it doesn't have an easy way to just plug Power BI straight into it. So I kind of built a process which uses kind of Power Automate, Azure Data Factory to pull the data into Microsoft Dataverse, which then Power BI can use. And then from Power BI, we can link that to all the other data from our main application. So it's all actually, I mean, it sounds complex, it's all relatively straightforward, all using tools that exist within like Microsoft 365. Most of those are actually quite low cost, or don't cost anything at the scale you're using them, but it's all really powerful stuff. And I'm sure if you all think about it, there's going to be areas where you'll think, if I could just combine the data from here with the data from there, these two different disparate systems, it would be amazing, because then I could answer all these questions about how this data links between the two, or just save myself and my teams loads of times from having to manually compile it every month or quarter or whatever. So
yeah, and I think for me, it's the visualization. I think I'm a simple guy. You've taken the mickey out of me a lot over the last 20 years, Paul, for my lack of attention to detail when it comes to being faced with sheets and sheets of data and massive Excel spreadsheets. It's a bit of a, I go a bit number blind, but it's the visualization that I love, and it's the centralization. I think you can't overemphasize that enough. I don't have to go into CRM to look at a report and then come out of that and go into finance to look at a report and then come out of that to look at our customer satisfaction system to look at a report. I go into one web browser and I've got all of the information, all of the data across the whole of the business in a really visually satisfying way. And that, for me, is the power of what you delivered on our Power BI platform. So talking of visualization, we talked for 10, 15 minutes. I think it's probably time to jump in and show people what we're talking about. Paul, I'll let you share your screen. We are going to look at Ramsack reports here. As I said, we're using ourselves as a sort of a use case demonstration here. So we are going to use Ramsack data. But I think with the exception of our sales data, which I'll say now we have fabricated, but everything else is real live data that we're going to share with you. And I think okay, we're an IT support business, but I don't think what we're looking at is going to be any different to any of the people on our call today. We're looking at operational information, customer data, customer satisfaction data, finance systems, resource scheduling, planning, operational data. We're all delivering different things, but we all have, at the end of the day, we all have people, products, and services to think about. So, Paul, do you want to jump in and talk about some of the reports that you created?
Yeah, absolutely. And just touch on something you just said there in terms of how you see data. And obviously, Dan, you've said you're a very visual person, but other people in the organization potentially are more kind of numbers, detail, table, kind of tabular format data. And actually, so So you can see in some of the reports here, which I'll touch on, that we've kind of got both. So we can present data, however, like how that works for different individuals. So it's kind of, and whatever, so different individuals, and also the data itself sometimes lends itself to a particular sort of style of reporting. So, I mean, I think key thread through these demos, as you'll see, is that all that, like Dan's touched on, all the data in one place. There's no jumping around between different screens within the same application, or jumping or within different systems itself. So huge amount of time saved, both in preparing but also in meetings. So if you think of the amount of time you probably, if you're doing a kind of a KPI meeting, the amount of time potentially you can spend kind of switching between applications to see different data on different areas, as well as obviously not having to compile it. And like Dan said, this is kind of an example of our data. We've been through, and I've kind of redacted some of the kind of customer, like where kind of customer names appear. So some of it's been adjusted a bit. It's probably, what you'll see is probably about 10% or maybe less of what we use on a day-to-day. There's a huge number of reports in there that we've generated. Obviously, there's loads of that we can't show. So obviously, there's a big kind of a whole finance report pack, which is huge, as you'd expect from finance teams, which we're constantly evolving and constantly adding to. But obviously, that there's quite a lot in there. It's very hard to you redact that to the point that basically it's just kind of a blank page with a few lines on it. So we won't be going kind of through that. Just another kind of comment on this as well is that pretty much anything's possible from a branding perspective with Power BI. So ours are quite functional. We kind of have our logo, as you'll see, but you can have kind of corporate color schemes, backgrounds, so they can look really impressive for sort of board report and investors and those kind of things. Just a word of caution, though, that obviously they do need to remain readable. So if you've got a particularly there are certain color palettes for some organizations which really might not lend themselves to actually readable reports. So there might, I know kind of those kind of, Dan's quite heavily involved in kind of marketing at Ramsec, and I'd say that sometimes there might need to be a little bit of flexibility around the kind of branding if that starts impacting functionality. So I'll kind of share my let me just share my screen.
Yep, we've got that, Paul.
So yeah, you've got that there. Great. So we'll start off here. So something that really important at Ramsec is understanding each customer in terms of service quality, security, and obviously kind of the commercials and profitability. So for years and years, we've had, I mean, going back probably 15 years at least, we've had client 360 meetings where various people from various different teams come together to kind of review each customer. They're really valuable, but can be really time consuming to prepare for. So quite expensive in terms of resourcing. So back before the days of Power BI, the various teams spent hours and hours preparing for each of those meetings, which was kind of manageable 15 years ago when we were small, but just the scale of Ramsec now, just not practical and really expensive, has become more expensive as we've grown. So I developed the client report, which pulls all of the information that different teams were compiling or reviewing manually into a single report, always up to date. So the time spent in the meetings is actually reviewing key data, not digging around a different place to find it. So, and also it brings quite good structure to the meeting, because we've kind of designed the full report, which isn't, we've just kind of got some samples here. Actually, that kind of draws the people in the meeting through kind of the structure of it, so they just kind of work through it in order. So it's also a really valuable resource anytime someone just wants to know more about a customer, because it pulls all of the customer information into one place. So kind of the relationship team and the kind of support management team, finance, anyone, if there's a kind of query about a customer, there's one place they can go to get kind of a really good kind of health check overview of a particular customer, again, without having to go to lots of different places. So main page, obviously you can see a combination of kind of charts and tables. We have got an example on the, that's our main kind of page. So looking at the support breakdown page, it's kind of an example of how we use data to drill down into different kind of ticket types. So you can see here one of the visualizations we have looks at the type of tickets, the categories. So it's really useful to be able to drill down to understand what kind of tickets and where the bulk of the tickets are coming from for a particular client, along with things like kind of tickets by day of the week. That's not something that we could get we could get out of our system as it stands, because it's just not a report that when they develop the reporting system for our support system, not something that they prioritized as kind of a standard report. But here it's actually useful to be able to see. But ours is relatively flat, but some clients we can have really big spikes on particular days of the week when they're kind of for whatever reason. So also useful, really useful to see sort of top support users for particular clients. So again, we can kind of see if there are any outliers there. And then we also generate we also use this for a client report, which some of you might recognise, that we share with clients. Again, this is something that we export to PDF and then send out to the client and sit and review with them during kind of regular client review meetings. Just show them their usage around support. Again, huge time saver for pulling that data together, and something that's really useful for our clients.
Yeah, and so, I use this. Yeah. I use this report all the time, and as you said, we previously produced this once a month or once every couple of months for a client 360 meeting, but now it's live. And if I'm about to jump on a phone call with somebody, I routinely just have a quick look on the client report, and I can just see, is there anything I need to know about? And all of this data has come from different sources, isn't it? We're tracking data from the support ticketing system. We're tracking data from our customer satisfaction system, but also from our phone system. We use Teams phones, and we've got information that comes into this in terms of when people are calling in, and it's just coming from multiple sources. And I have, again, I've said it before, but I love the fact that I have one shortcut in my bookmarks, in my web browser, and there's the data, and it's live, it's refreshed. I think this report's refreshed sort of every hour or so, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that's interesting, which kind of that worth bearing in mind with kind of Power BI, is you can pull individual snippets of different reports together into kind of dashboards. So you might kind of say well, actually, I'm really interested in this one report, or one kind of chart from the finance team's report pack, and another report from the operations team report pack. And for me personally, I want to pull all those together into a single dashboard, which is all kind of mobile ready as well. So all of these reports can be viewed on a mobile device and are formatted so they work on a mobile device with all the same data in the same report. It's just the layout changes on mobile. So yes, it's kind of really powerful to be able to kind of pull all that stuff together from different places. So,
but these are interactive as well, yes, aren't they? So you can, if you see something that doesn't look right, you can kind of click in and click down into the detail.
Yeah, absolutely. So we might look at 365 and look into different areas of different areas. So then we can see, so particular for we could look at where we're having the kind of different high volumes of tickets. So all fully interactive.
And for me, I mean, this report was really interesting. That puts more context into the tickets by days of the week. For example, with some clients, we were able to then analyze, well, why do they log so many more tickets on a Wednesday? And we were able to kind of track back through this and go, they've got a third-party application that updates every Tuesday night, and it's causing loads of problems. But we wouldn't have known that had we not been able to click on these various bar charts and go, well, why is that like that? So yeah, really powerful. Sorry, I talked over you there, Paul.
Absolutely. No, it's all good. It's all good. So just moving on to the onto the kind of customer service side, which we sort of touched on a little bit here, but just going to go into a bit more kind of detail around a specific report that we use for our kind of support team. So obviously customer service, absolutely key for Ramsec, and I'm sure all of you. In particular, our head of support services and support team management need visibility into ticket volumes and support performance. But to drive improvement, they also need to be able to drill down into the data in various different ways and have the flexibility to experiment, so we can uncover new areas for improvement that aren't kind of really obvious. I mean, it's one of the big strengths of Power BI is once we've got the data model right underneath, actually those kind of experimenting with what might be interesting around the data is actually quite quick and quite easy in a lot of cases. So obviously we've got our top line kind of SLA performance trends, which are kind of across all customers, along with historic information, which again really difficult to get out of the system as it stood. We could get current SLA performance, but actually looking back over the previous year was quite hard work, and you'd have to manually be going through and running reports for various different months in order to kind of see that overall picture. So again, not something that we would have done on a regular basis, but this gives us a really clear kind of view of that historic performance as well as kind of current month, but also allows us to drill down into sort of service level performance by specific support teams, because as you probably know, we kind of have the team split into two. So again, kind of looking at individual teams and also looking at individual customers as well, because obviously the big picture is great. The SLA performance is kind of awesome, but we want to make sure that's reflected across every customer, and we haven't lost anyone within at that top level. Yeah, we've not lost any customers there that actually might not be having the greatest experience for various different reasons. So we want to be able to drill down and see by customer. So normally this is kind of, we've kind of blanked out the data here for obvious reasons, but this kind of would along the bottom there would normally kind of show kind of customers, so we can kind of see where individual kind of customers are, where they potentially have issues. It might be related to kind of underlying issues in systems, or kind of sometimes more complex tickets that take longer to resolve. But really important that we can quickly spot kind of outliers in there to make sure that everyone's got a great experience. Again, really difficult. I mean, imagine if people on the call, if you kind of were to think about how do you know that every one of your customers is having a great experience? Can you see that in one place that just leaps out at you, where there's someone that's kind of got an issue that needs some attention? You need to work out why is that specific customer not having the same experience as kind of all of our others. As we sort of touched on earlier, we do a lot of an analysis in the support team by kind of category of ticket. So we can kind of drill down into individual kind of tickets and understand where all of our tickets are coming from. What are kind of the particular issues? There's kind of a general theme that we often find around kind of, say, kind of permissions and kind of password resets are really a kind of really common high volume one for us. And then you've got some sort of innovative different ways of visualizing data. So kind of like word clouds sometimes are really useful, that kind of automatically get generated, so we can maybe see where there are. I mean, some of those fillers, but you can maybe see where there are areas to work on. And in our case, we both look at this in terms of volume of tickets and the amount of time we're spending on them. And also, as Dan touched on, we do reporting on our kind of phone system as well. So we moved to Teams calling kind of back sort of last year. And that means that now we can pull in that data into Power BI to make sure that we're getting the resourcing right at different times of the day, so we can see kind of what times of the day we get the large number of calls, what day of the week we get the large number of calls, so we can this is really useful information around being able to kind of make sure we've got the right number of people covering the phones at the kind of different times of the day, and make sure that kind of clients are getting a kind of good experience. So again, that without Power BI, that would have meant the support managers periodically going off the contact center system, running a report, comparing it with data in the support system, all time consuming stuff. But here it all just kind of links together.
And the reality is those reports weren't being run. I think that's the point, isn't it? When it was really complicated and you'd got a bit of a picture over here and a bit of a picture over there, you just didn't look at it. It was just too complex. Whereas now it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was another one of those ones that you'd love to look at, but can you justify the time spending a couple of hours a month going off and running all these reports and compiling all the data to try and just, in a lot of cases, confirm what you thought? But it's often where you think that you're going to confirm what you thought, and then suddenly something jumps out at you from the data, which is a real wow moment of like, oh, okay, that's a real game changer.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I was just thinking as well about the fact that you said at the beginning, we started with a CRM system, and the CRM system was brilliant, but the built-in reporting was a little bit rubbish, and that was the starting of our journey into Power BI. Was we found this really great application that we want to use. We love it for everything apart from the reporting, but we can do reporting elsewhere. But actually, the reality is any built-in reporting within a platform is designed by the software developers, is designed by the people that think they know how you're going to use their system. The reality is every organization is different, and every organization has its own levers to pull and press. And I guess that's the point of this, isn't it? We haven't had our reporting defined. We've said, it would be really interesting if we could look at what's coming in support tickets, what's coming in CSAT, what's coming in the phone system, and we've created the report that we need rather than having it defined for us. So I think that's it's been really important. I think we're going to look at some.
Oh, and just touching on that as well. It's kind of also that flexibility that those needs change. So when you launch a new business plan at the start of the financial year, what are you monitoring? What do you need to monitor on that to make sure you're hitting those objectives and you're on track for your business plan? That's going to potentially change every year as you have a new focus. So again, it's kind of having that flexible reporting where at the start of the year we can just say, right, this is what we need to focus on. This is where we want our KPIs to be focused. That let's build something around that, which then isn't, again, it's not going off to developers or trying to kind of, again, kind of get kind of loads of really complex reports. And once you've got the fundamentals right, actually doing that kind of KPI monitoring is really useful. Like I say, straightforward.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. What we want to measure changes all the time, because once you've got something working brilliantly, you don't need to carry on measuring it. So you brought this. This probably moves more into sort of operations and resource planning. I think this slide that you just brought up.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got our operations team responsible for resource management. So when a new client comes in, how do you know who's best to allocate? How do you manage consultant resourcing for projects, long-term planning, those kind of things? The data's all in the system, obviously, because that's where we do all our resource management and scheduling from. But it's difficult to see a single pane overview of resourcing without switching lots of between different consultants, different calendars, different months. So I pulled all that together into kind of Power BI with charts visualizing the data in kind of various different ways. So this is an example of our technical consultant kind of scheduling, which shows our overall kind of workload by month, including markers showing the number of actual working days in that month, which can have a significant impact on decision making. So for example, if you look at March and April 2023, if you looked at that without ignoring the kind of the number of working days in those months, you potentially would think, well, actually, April was less busy than March. Whereas actually it's the other way around in terms of available days and kind of capacity, because April last year we had a really high number of bank holidays and the length of that month. So actually there were kind of fairly low number of working days in that month, which has a real impact on planning. If you're looking ahead to the future, it's really useful to obviously know that actually April hasn't got as much capacity as you thought it'd do. So maybe you want to pull some of those projects forward into March or push them back into kind of May or June, because actually you're then going to have more capacity. Also factors in kind of our annual leave as well, which is obviously a factor in kind of around the summer and around kind of Christmas time, which obviously then kind of starts to ease in the autumn and kind of late spring. So next interesting one is obviously, as you're probably aware, we offer regular kind of on-site field support consultant time. So many clients have got kind of a weekly visit with a field support consultant on a specific day of the week to deal with kind of general kind of end user issues, kind of stuff around the kind of IT stuff around the kind of on-site, those sort of things. This is another area where it was really difficult and time consuming to figure out which days had capacity, as it meant you had to kind of go through and look through every one of the field support consultants, and every week, in reality, probably sit there with a pencil and a bit of paper and a tally chart, working out availability kind of during that kind of over like which days of the week you had capacity. So this chart brings all of that information together into one screen, shows resourcing by weekday and by month. So when a new client comes on board, it's easy to see at a glance which weekdays have got capacity and what the resourcing requirements are in the future. And this, I just wonder, this is a good example here, just kind of how important it is to think carefully about the reports you're creating and considering like the bigger picture and spending time to make sure they're accurate. So if you look at this, look at January in this chart, which I've got kind of on the screen here, which has got a capacity line set at 4 weeks per month, because I mean, we all probably think there's 4 weeks in a kind of month. So what would you say if a client came and asked for visits on a Wednesday? You probably you'd look at this and go, well, no, actually, sorry, we haven't got availability, but maybe we can fit you in another day. Potentially unhappy client because they really, really want Wednesdays in January, and we've kind of said we can't do it. But if you look at this second version, which is the chart we actually use, it factors in how many working days there are in each month, because that's variable. That not all months are 4 weeks. Not all months have a fixed number of Mondays and Fridays in them. It varies depending on the start and the end of the month and how many weeks are in the month. So actually in January this year, there were actually 5 Mondays, Tuesdays and Wednesdays in that month, 4 Thursdays and Fridays. Long month, the way the months fell, that's how they were. So actually, if you were to look at this chart and answer that same question, you'd be able to say, well, actually, yeah, we've got a fair bit of capacity on a Wednesday, actually more capacity than on Thursdays in January, because it factors in the number of days of the month. It's why it's really important to get the attention to detail right, because it makes a huge difference to the decisions you make when you're looking at the actual data. And again, this is all stuff that just wasn't possible before Power BI, because we couldn't. It was very, very much gut feel. We really had to rely prior to having this kind of level of data on. Yeah, it feels like Wednesdays are busy, or it feels like Mondays are busy, when actually that might not be the case.
I think it's worth saying as well for the people that are looking at this screen online, the ability to drill down. I mean, we don't need to go into it, Paul. I'm conscious of time, but you can see you've got these kind of radio buttons at the side. So it's really simple to go, well, I want to look at a given month. I want to look at a given day. You can click in on the detail, and everything is live and interactive. So, you know, the more detailed folk on the call, the finance folk, for example, you depending on how the report is built, you can set the parameters. You know, we can add date sliders into here, so we could say, well, I want to do a comparison from this point to this point. All of that is just there. It's just live in the system, isn't it? I think
yeah, absolutely.
I think you did some work to look at geographically where people are based from a scheduling point of view as well, didn't you?
Yeah. So there's kind of an interesting one, which is kind of this kind of client consultant mapping, which obviously we've kind of removed data because there is some customer and kind of personal data in there, but it's kind of one where we thought it'd be useful just to be able to see where a consultant's based and where are their clients based. This was really quick. I mean, this was very quick to chuck together in Power BI. But if you think of like having something like this developed for you, I mean, if it's not available in your applications, go off and have something like this developed. It's probably going to be a hugely expensive kind of complex project to have kind of mapping of where are your clients, where are your staff, where are engineers, all of that. This is basically is quite happy to feed in postcode information and then give you a chart of it all out of the box with Power BI. There's nothing kind of particularly sophisticated in here. So it just shows how flexible and kind of how easy it is to kind of create some of this stuff. Things that there have been often things that we've thought of are going to be like, oh, that's going to be really complex and massive amount of work, and actually it's turned into like a really quick chart to pull together. Equally, there are some things that you think are going to be really easy and are phenomenally complicated because of the way you need to manipulate the data. But by and large, it's kind of it's all quite straightforward. So
we've looked a little bit at sort of customer satisfaction. We've looked a little bit at operations. I think sales is the next area we're going to look at, and this is where we have completely made up fictional data for obvious reasons for sharing on a webinar that we're recording. But from my point of view, I spent a lot of time creating reports and spreadsheets on sales, and you knocked out hours of my working week in automating that, because I was no longer producing the same sort of analysis and reports for the leadership team meetings and things like that. So can we jump into that, Paul? Is that okay? Give us an example of
that's fine.
Some sales reporting.
Yeah, I'll just stop sharing that and share this. Like I said, we've had to kind of do this as a kind of mock-up because of the nature of the data. So you will see that none of this adds up at all. I mean, literally, this is all just random data. So you will see, don't look at any of the data because it is just completely random. None of the conditional formatting is correct. It is literally just ended. But this is an exact kind of visually, this is an exact copy of what we have in Power BI. So with what we've got, just kind of go through, we've got a single page view across all of the different income types, comparing targets plus targets, actuals, year-on-year growth. So again, this is something that, like I say, I'll scroll through because it's quite a wide, but yeah, it just kind of gives you an idea that from here, from looking sort of through this, like I say, all color coded to make it kind of nice and easy to see, conditional formatting, so it's really easy to see where we're kind of behind or ahead of target. But really kind of easy then for anyone in the business, and actually, like I say, we're very kind of open with our data and making sure everyone feels engaged and everyone feels kind of they've got ownership and they're having an impact on all of this. So anyone can go and kind of see this data and just be able to kind of, just see it really easily in a single place, not jumping around. Also worth kind of bear in mind that they're noting that the year-on-year figures are actually calculated on a daily basis. So it doesn't compare end of month to end of month. It compares, so we're 19th of March. So the data will compare 19th of March here today with 19th of March in 2023, when you kind of come to look at those year-on-year figures. So it's really easy to see. Everyone in all the teams knows exactly where they are against all the various sort of targets, which I know, Dan, you've kind of said is really useful. So they kind of, like I say, feel really included and see what impact they're having on the kind of business goals. As you touched on, Dan, when you were commercial director, you'd be manually compiling this every month with far less detail and far less comparison to previous years. Purely because it would have just taken you, I mean, it took you hours as it was to pull together the kind of information as it was, to go through and start comparing all of that to kind of on a daily basis to previous years and against kind of other areas and other kind of service lines would have just taken many times as long.
And there was room for error. I think that's the other thing. Wherever there's kind of like manual keying of data, there's room for human error. And what used to happen is our quoting system and our CRM platform would tell me what we had won, and I was taking a report from that and I was keying it into Excel spreadsheets, and it's very, very easy to miskey data when you're typing it in. So it's just really accurate as well, which is what I love about this. And as you said, live to the day. This report refreshes every sort of couple of hours, so our team can have a look and see where we're going. Matt, who runs this part of our business, has got his fingertips on the data that he needs. We track lots, as I'm sure most of the people on the call do, we track lots of different metrics, different types of things that we're selling, whether it's products, whether it's services, whether it's licensing, whatever. We want to look at all of it. And this report has expanded over the years. It started off saying, well, here's my target, here's how I've done, how much have I got left to do? But then we started to put in year-on-year stuff and growth percentages. If you scroll right to the end, there's a column that adds all of these things up and shows me where I am. And that visualization, that conditional formatting, which people that use Excel will be quite familiar with, but you bake that conditional formatting into Power BI as well, so I can very quickly see whether figures are up or down. And it's really useful, and it builds over the year. When I go in month one, I've just got that month one line, and then it sort of builds. So this for me was really powerful. Thank you for sharing.
And a good example of kind of how Power BI is pulling data from multiple sources, because the targets all come from an Excel spreadsheet that Matt can just update as he needs to update them, and then they just reflect immediately in this, and then everything recalculates automatically against kind of variance against target straight away. So there's he can just update that in an Excel spreadsheet without needing to go back and change anything in reports. Yeah,
that's a good point. And in fact, I mean, this isn't our data, but it's reflective of the kind of thing that we produce. But yes, you're right. You've got Matt updating targets in an Excel spreadsheet. You've got one business coming from our CRM system, and actually you've got our direct debit business, which doesn't go anywhere near our CRM system. That comes straight out of our finance platform, doesn't it? So there's 3 different sets of data forming this table and updating itself every couple of hours. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Cool. I'm conscious of time, so if I stop sharing this, if we we can move on from the demo.
Yeah, we've probably given people a good overview of sort of how this looks and feels. So if somebody's on this call, they're not using Power BI at the moment, and this is all new to them, how do we get started? What's the process, Paul?
So I would say my view is it's definitely worth, I'd say, to start small. So the first stage is to be and kind of prove the value of the reports, which also makes some significant savings around time savings around reporting, because the goal is to automate a chunk of kind of what's having to be kind of done manually, but without spending a kind of huge amount of money at that stage. I think it's a challenge to kind of, I wouldn't think it's wise to kind of go and think, right, we want to have, these are all the reports we're ever going to want, which will change in time anyway. And then we're going to want to produce a massive kind of data model, masses of report packs, and just do that as one massive project. I think it's definitely something I've seen is kind of iterative and grows and develops over time. Just a quick touch, the note will come up, but just a quick touch on licensing. So if you're producing reports just for yourself as an individual, Power BI Desktop's free. There's doesn't necessarily need to license that. If it's just, I want to produce and automate the reports that I want to use, and I need to access. But more generally, if you're looking at, most of the time you want to share reports around the organization, then you'd be looking at Power BI Pro licenses for those who are consuming reports. You can get standalone, or they're part of E5, the Microsoft E5 kind of suite. There is a publish to web feature in Power BI Desktop, but I would strongly advise against using that unless you're happy for the data to be made public, because it is just a publicly shared link. There have been some big breaches of sensitive information where publish to web was being used. They didn't realize it was accessible from the internet with no authentication or restrictions. It's just a complex link, which if anyone has access to that link, or it gets indexed and comes up in a Google search, then it's just available publicly. But if you're using Power BI Pro, you get full security by group and individual, right, even down to within a report, what data they can see within reports based on kind of security roles. I mean, you could also, if you just use Power BI Desktop, you can also publish to PDF using Power BI Desktop and just share those internally, but then you don't have the sort of the interaction within those charts. So just thought I'd touch on that licensing.
That's brilliant. And actually, I think that covers off one of the questions that had come in actually. So Power BI Pro is so that's for people that are developing these reports, but then the free version is good for people that just need to view the reports. Is that what you're saying?
No, so actually it's the other way around. So Power BI Desktop, where you're building the reports, is actually free, ironically. But that's just for your use. You can't safely share those interactive reports from your data. You could build the report and send that copy of that data file to other people using desktop. But fundamentally, if you've got multiple people wanting to use reports, that's really where you're kind of into Power BI Pro, which again only needs licensing. It needs licensing for the people who are interacting with those reports. So again, might not be for all users, might just be your leadership team or kind of key people, not necessarily the whole organization. So in terms of actually how you get it done, it's kind of stage one involves basically me building a data model, which is where you're pulling all the data in from these different sources, linking it together and doing some manipulation, so that can then be used on the reporting side. So for example, at first stage, you might kind of look at linking ERP or CRM system with a couple of spreadsheets, which forms that foundation. Then you build on by adding more data sources and more manipulation of that data in the future. Then on top of that, you build a report pack, which is where you're automating those key reports that are currently being created manually. So there's an immediate saving in time. Plus, we'd always look to try and build in some new reports that you would like, that you don't currently have. Plus, I really like looking at data. I enjoy kind of finding interesting kind of nuggets in there. So I'd always aim to look for new insights that you hadn't even thought about that hopefully will kind of get a few like kind of, oh, wow, kind of moments when you start using the reports. And I say, in terms of touching earlier, that report pack can go as far or as kind of do as little branding as you like, really. So it's not a huge amount of time to kind of put a pack together for template it. So you can have something that looks really great for kind of board meetings or showing to customers or investors or whatever else. And then over time, you build on that first stage. So as you go on through subsequent stages, you kind of more data sources, growing the report back, but always as you've proven and you sort of see the value of what you've already got. So it should always kind of be valuable as it moves through that journey. So
I think that's a really good point. And I think, you said it there. I think if an organization was to wait to specify every single report it would possibly need, I don't think the project would ever get started. And I think, again, we've talked about this webinar being based on our own use case. We started small, didn't we? We started by saying, we want to know, I think we started in support. We wanted to be able to report on how the help desk was doing with customer service delivery tickets. And that's where we started. It was then when you started bringing that report into a leadership team meeting that other heads of department around the leadership table started going, that's quite interesting. So if you can tell that, can you also tell this from the system? And I think it's fair to say that our journey with Power BI has never ended. I think 5 years on, we are still coming to you most months asking you to tweak a report, change a report, create something new. And you talked about that actually when you said, like at the beginning of a business year, for example, you'd build something new to reflect this year's goals and targets. And I think there is no end, really, is there?
No, it definitely kind of continues to evolve and grow over time as the needs change and there's more demand for data. And also we kind of have to go through a process periodically of pruning old reports that we thought we needed and either we thought we needed but actually turned out not to be as valuable as thought or no longer need. And we just kind of prune those out periodically to kind of keep the reports manageable. Or it could even be just you've got a new product. So last year we launched the Secure Plus security kind of monitoring and alerting service. That's been a big focus. So we built some reports around that just to kind of monitor that in terms of kind of service and traction and all those kind of things. But again, it could even be you've got a big project on the go and you really need to monitor some specific aspects of that kind of particular project. But with a good kind of data model behind the scenes, it's then kind of usually quite straightforward to kind of add in charts and tables on top of that once you've got the kind of the base in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as you said, start small, work out what is the data that you're already looking at and that is taking you time to produce. And I think the big win for me in this is we are not spending time producing reports for meetings anymore. So we don't spend time producing reports. We spend that time adding value by going, okay, here's the data, what does it tell us? And we're driving efficiency and improvements based on real-time knowledge, which is such a better use of our time than having somebody spending hours keying data in and producing reports which are immediately effectively out of date. They're immediately last month's data or whatever it might be. So I think
if you think of the value of kind of someone came to you and said, okay, what would it be worth to free up maybe 2 days a month for your whole leadership team?
Absolutely.
It's kind of even just the time saving on top of all the insights and the kind of the new stuff you can learn about the business it's really powerful.
And I think for us, we didn't know what we didn't know. So that's why I say as well, this journey never ends. I think it was only when you started to present data to us that we went, okay, that's really interesting. So can we also find out what this means or what that does? We didn't know some of the questions we needed to ask. So I think if we'd waited to have a perfect brief, it would have never happened. And I know, part of your consultancy style is very flexible. You don't need everything to be set out in detail. It's very much, okay, we've happened upon this. Where can we go from there? And I think that, as I say, I know we're constantly asking you to tweak and make changes. Well, thank you very much. We're not going anywhere. Feel free to follow up with any questions afterwards, and indeed we'll reach out to you. we are happy to talk to you about Power BI consultancy services. It's part of the sort of the range of offerings that we're able to support your organization with. Paul's got some really good sort of approaches to producing this data, and if you're whether you're an existing Power BI user and feel that you need a little bit of extra training and support or refinement of reporting, or whether you're brand new to this, we've got like a starter package for just getting you your first 2 or 3 reports integrated, set up and deployed. More than happy to talk to you about that. So feel free to drop us a line. Shortly after the call, Titania will email you with a link to a very, very quick survey. Please do take a minute to fill it in. It really helps us to improve our ongoing program of webinars if you give us feedback about what does and doesn't work for you and what else you'd like to see in the future. But for now, Paul, thank you very much for sharing your screen and for joining us. Thank you to everybody that's attended today, and have a very good morning. Thank you.